You wake up in the morning, right? You swing your legs out of bed, and your bare feet hit the solid wood of the floorboards.
Yeah, that classic morning routine.
Exactly. And, you walk into the kitchen, you grab a heavy ceramic mug, pour your coffee, and look out the window at the morning light. And it all feels entirely, well, undeniable.
Totally undeniable.
Like you'd bet your life that the floor is solid, that time is moving forward into the day, and that the mug in your hand is exactly what it looks like.
Right, because why wouldn't you?
Right. But here is the really unsettling truth we are exploring today in this deep dive. Your brain is actively hallucinating all of it. The physical world you think you are interacting with is actually this elaborate evolutionary illusion.
It's a massive claim to make. I mean, it really is. But the moment you actually stop taking your environment for granted, and put it under the microscope, that undeniable world you just described starts to unravel pretty rapidly.
It really does.
Because we rely heavily on our common sense to navigate the day, but common sense is honestly a terrible tool for understanding the actual architecture of the universe.
Which is exactly why we are pulling apart our grounding text today. It's called the reality paradox. And it's framed around this incredibly mind-bending dialogue between two figures named Nick and Maya, and they're debating the discoveries of this mysterious time traveler.
Yeah, the time traveler brings in some wild concepts.
Completely wild. They tackled the absolute biggest question imaginable, which is, what is reality? Is it the stuff we see and touch, or is it just this constructed facade? So, okay, let's unpack this, because according to the neuroscience and the quantum physics laid out in the source, the external reality we inhabit is actually far stranger than our own consciousness.
It really is. And the central premise that Nick and Maya explore is that human beings are walking around completely blind to the vast majority of what is actually happening in the room with them at any given second.
Which is terrifying, honestly.
Right. I mean, we like to believe our physical senses, like sight, sound, touch, are just these clear windows that let us view the universe directly. But the text argues that they are not windows at all. They are heavy, heavy filters.
And heavily censored ones at that. I mean, the source points out that your eyes detect only a microscopic fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Right, just a tiny sliver.
Yeah. There are radio waves, X-rays, infrared, and ultraviolet information just swirling around us constantly, like passing right through the space we occupy. But our biological hardware just, well, it refuses to pick it up.
It just edits it out.
Exactly.
Weird.
We assume we are experiencing the raw data of reality. But as the time traveler observes in the text, we are really just experiencing a highly compressed, simplified model that our brains generate.
And what's fascinating here is the sheer amount of data compression happening in real time. I mean, we have to separate the physical object from the subjective experience of the object.
Oh, like the apple example from the text.
Yes, the classic red apple. So when you hold an apple, you perceive redness. Your intuition tells you that, red is an inherent property of the fruit itself.
Or a red apple, that's just what it is.
Right, but physics tells us redness does not exist in the apple itself.
Right, the redness is entirely manufactured in the brain. The physical apple is merely absorbing certain wavelengths of light and reflecting others.
Exactly.
And then those specific reflected wavelengths hit the retina. They travel as electrical pulses to the visual cortex. And your brain basically renders that signal into the subjective, qualitative experience we call red.
It is a profound realization when you really think about it. The redness is in your mind. It's not in the object.
Wow.
And the source applies this logic across the board. The sweetness of the apple, the sharp smell of that morning coffee we mentioned, the smooth texture of your ceramic mug, none of those qualities exist out there in the void.
They're just interpretations.
Yeah, they are internal translations of external, colorless, odorless data. The map is just not the territory.
I love that phrase. And the text uses this brilliant computer desktop analogy for this. Think about a blue folder icon on your computer screen.
Right.
When you look at that blue folder, you don't assume that the actual data inside the hard drive looks like a tiny blue paper folder.
No, of course not.
Because the real data is this wildly complex arrangement of microscopic voltages and binary code. The blue folder is just a graphical user interface. It's a convenient fiction that allows you to drag and drop files without having to manually rewrite ones and zeros.
That analogy perfectly captures the biological situation we are in. The world you experience every day is essentially a 3D graphical user interface.
A biological VR headset.
Exactly. It is incredibly useful for navigating your environment, but it bears almost no structural resemblance to the underlying reality it actually represents.
Which makes me wonder, If our daily perception is just the user interface, what happens if we try to look past the screen at the actual motherboard of the universe? Like, if we use modern physics to look at the raw space and matter itself, we should find the bedrock of reality, shouldn't we?
Well, you would think so. That is definitely the intuitive assumption. But moving from neuroscience into physics only deepens the paradox, honestly.
Oh boy.
Yeah. When we look past that biological interface, we find that the physical motherboard is equally illusory. Take empty space, for example. We look around a room and we categorize things into two boxes. There's stuff, and there's the empty distance between the stuff.
Like the void.
Right. But modern physics tells us space is never truly empty.
Yeah, the source notes that what we perceive as a void is actually boiling with latent activity, like vacuum energy, quantum fluctuations, invisible fields. It's like the universe appears utterly incapable of containing true nothingness.
That's a great way to put it. Space is essentially a fabric of fields. You've got electromagnetic fields, gravitational fields, the Higgs field. What we call a completely empty vacuum is actually just a space where those fields are resting at their lowest energy state.
But they're not gone.
No, they are still there, just humming with potential, occasionally popping virtual particles in and out of existence. So the empty space between objects is actually this rich, dynamic medium.
Okay, but that brings up a fascinating contradiction from the text, though. If the empty space isn't empty, you'd assume the solid stuff is at least reliably solid.
You would hope so.
Right. I know we've all heard that classic stadium comparison from high school chemistry, but the text forces us to really visualize it. If you were to take a single atom and scale it up to the size of a massive football stadium, the dense nucleus of that atom would be smaller than a marble sitting alone on the 50-yard line.
Just a tiny marble in all that space.
Yeah. And the electrons would be microscopic specks flying around the nosebleed seats. Everything in between is just space.
The staggering implication being that the chair you are sitting on right now, the earth beneath you, and your own physical body are composed almost entirely of empty space.
Okay, wait. If everything is mostly empty space, why does it hurt my knuckles when I knock on a wooden table? Why does it feel solid? I mean, why doesn't my incredibly empty hand just pass right through the incredibly empty desk?
It's a brilliant question, and the answer comes down to electromagnetism. When you knock on a wooden table, what you are experiencing is not solid matter crashing into solid matter.
It's not. No.
You are feeling a forceful interaction of fields. The electrons orbiting the atoms in your hand carry a negative electrical charge, and the electrons in the wood also carry a negative charge.
And negative repels negative.
Yes, exactly. But more specifically, there is this rule in quantum mechanics called the Pauli exclusion principle.
Okay,
And
right.
that dictates that certain particles, like electrons, basically refuse to occupy the same quantum state or the same physical space at the same time. So when you bring your hand close to the table, the electron clouds in your skin violently repel the electron clouds in the wood.
And that invisible repulsion is translated by your nerve endings into a sharp electrical signal.
Yep, which your brain interprets as the sensation of a solid surface.
So solidity is really just a sensation caused by interacting force fields.
It is an extremely convincing illusion.
Yeah.
There is no actual physical contact in the way we traditionally imagine it. You are essentially hovering a microscopic fraction of a millimeter above the chair you were sitting on right now, supported entirely by electromagnetic repulsion.
That is just wild. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because the text takes us down another level. We know matter is mostly space bound by electromagnetism. But if we zoom all the way down past the stadium, past the marble, right down to the fundamental quantum particles themselves, the rules of reality just fracture completely.
Oh, they shatter.
Yeah. Nick and Maya spend a significant portion of the text grappling with this wave-particle duality.
And this is where human intuition entirely breaks down. At the macroscopic level, things have fixed identities, right? A rock is a rock. A wave in the ocean is a wave.
Makes sense.
But down at the quantum level, fundamental particles like electrons and photons refuse to commit to a single identity. Depending on how you measure them, they will behave like distinct physical bullets like particles, or they will behave like smeared out immaterial waves of probability.
The source highlights that reality at this scale doesn't just lack a fixed form, it actually seems to actively respond to being measured. Which is so strange. Like, does this mean the universe is like an actor on a stage, changing its performance the second it realizes there's an audience watching?
It's a great image.
Because it sounds like reality isn't a fixed objective thing until a conscious observer forces it to be.
It's really tempting to think of it that way, and honestly, a lot of pop science falls into that exact trap. But we have to be very careful not to attribute consciousness or intent to the universe. When physicists talk about observation or measurement, they don't mean a human being looking at something with their eyes.
Wait, so it's not about conscious awareness.
No, not at all. In quantum mechanics, to measure a tiny particle, you have to interact with it physically. You have to bounce a photon of light off of it just to see where it is.
Okay.
But because the electron is so incredibly small, the mere act of hitting it with a photon alters its state. It becomes entangled with the measuring device. Before the interaction, the electron exists in a superposition.
Which is like a wave of multiple probable locations, right?
Exactly. But the moment the interaction occurs, that wave function mathematically collapses, and the particle is forced to assume a single definite position.
I see. So the act of gathering information fundamentally destroys the previous state of the system. We can literally never observe the universe without simultaneously interfering with it.
Exactly that. The universe rarely asks permission before being strange. As the text notes, these experiments produced results so bizarre that even the founders of quantum mechanics were deeply unsettled by them. Reality doesn't care about our comfort zones or our desire for an objective, untouched world. At its base level, reality is interactive, relational, and deeply weird.
Wow. Okay, so we have deconstructed our senses into a biological interface. We've reduced physical matter to interacting force fields, and we have reduced fundamental particles to shifting probabilities. But to really appreciate the depth of the reality paradox, we have to dismantle the invisible framework that holds all of this together.
Right, time itself.
Time. Time is arguably our most deeply ingrained assumption, don't you think?
Oh, without a doubt.
We experience it as a continuous, unstoppable flow. The past is a memory that is permanently gone. The present is the fleeting moment we inhabit. And the future is an open, unwritten expanse.
It feels very linear, yet the source points out that physicists have a massive problem validating that intuition.
Really?
Yeah, because the fundamental laws of physics don't distinguish between the past and the future. If you look at the equations governing motion, gravity, or electromagnetism, they function perfectly well, symmetrically.
Symmetrically, you mean they work both forwards and backwards?
Exactly. They work perfectly in either direction. There isn't a built-in mathematical preference for the future.
That is bizarre.
Right. From the perspective of pure mechanics, time has no inherent direction. So the massive question physics has to answer is, why do we perceive an arrow of time? Why does Monday always turn into Tuesday and never Sunday?
And the text points us toward the concept of entropy.
Yes.
It brings up the shattered glass example to explain this. If you drop a glass on your kitchen floor, it shatters into 100 pieces. Chaos increases.
Always.
Yeah, and you will never, in a trillion years, watch those shattered pieces spontaneously leap back off the floor and reassemble themselves into a perfect glass.
That is the classic textbook illustration, but the source text actually forces us to look at the why behind the glass.
Okay.
Entropy isn't some invisible force pushing time forward. It's simply a matter of statistical probability. Think of the glass and the concept of phase space. There is only one highly specific arrangement of atoms that results in a perfectly formed, useful glass.
Right.
But there are trillions upon trillions of possible ways for those atoms to be arranged as shattered, disordered fragments.
I see. So statistical probability overwhelmingly dictates that things will move from a highly ordered state into a messy, disordered state, simply because there are vastly more ways to be messy.
Yes. Human beings perceive that relentless slide into disorder, and our brains basically label that observation as the flow of time. But the deeper structural reality of time might be radically different than a flowing river.
Which leads to perhaps the most staggering thought in the entire source text. Some physicists, building on Einstein's theory of relativity, propose the block universe theory.
Yes, the block universe.
They suggest that the past, the present, and the future might actually all coexist simultaneously as a single, static, four-dimensional block.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Einstein showed that the passage of time is relative to the observer's speed and gravitational field. There is no universal clock ticking away in the background. Because every observer has a different slice of now, physicists argue that all moments in time must be equally real.
Okay, mind blown. If past, present, and future all coexist simultaneously, does that mean our lives are just a landscape we are walking across, rather than a fleeting moment that disappears once it happens?
It really reframes everything.
Like, are my childhood, my current self, and my old age all existing at once, permanently embedded in the block of space-time, and my consciousness is just a spotlight traveling over the scenery?
That is the exact implication of the block universe. It suggests a deeply deterministic reality that is entirely comfortable with possibilities human intuition instinctively rejects. We really struggle to process a reality where the past isn't gone because our brains are fundamentally wired to process time linearly, gathering memories to predict future threats.
Which brings us to the crucial pivot in Nick and Maya's dialogue. If reality is truly this bizarre, if time is a simultaneous landscape, if matter is empty space, if the spectrum of light is mostly invisible to us, and if quantum particles act like shifting probabilities, why on earth did our brains evolve to see it so inaccurately?
It's the ultimate question.
Why did evolution saddle us with this grand theatrical illusion?
Well, because evolution is entirely pragmatic. It does not care about ultimate truth. It only cares about fitness and survival. Evolutionary game theory, which the text relies heavily upon here, demonstrates that if an organism were to perceive reality exactly as it is, it would likely be outcompeted by an organism tuned to perceive only what is strictly necessary for survival.
So what does this all mean? Are you saying our ignorance of reality is literally an evolutionary survival tactic? We wear blinders so we don't get overwhelmed.
Absolutely. The computational cost of processing absolute reality would be fatal.
Fatal.
Think about it. Imagine if you were constantly perceiving the X-rays passing through your body, the vast emptiness of the atoms in the ground, the probabilistic nature of the rocks around you, and the non-linear structure of time. If a predator jumps out of the bushes, you just don't have the luxury of calculating the quantum wave function of the tiger.
Right. You just need to see a distinct, solid shape, label it danger, and run.
Exactly. The brain filters out the overwhelming complexity of the universe and provides you with a simple, solid, linear interface. The interface hides the truth to keep you alive.
It goes back to that smartphone analogy Maya points out. Human beings constantly mistake familiarity for understanding. We feel familiar with the universe because we wake up in it every day.
Right, we're used to it.
But as the text argues, that familiarity is not comprehension. It's like someone using a smartphone all day long, swiping, texting, taking photos. They are expert users of the interface, but they have absolutely no idea how the microchips, the antennas, or the binary coding actually work.
They don't need to.
Exactly. We are expert users of reality, completely ignorant of the underlying hardware.
And this raises an important question, perhaps the most humbling one the time traveler introduces. Humanity exists inside this massive, swirling mystery for a brief moment between birth and death. And yet we spend most of our lives mistaking our user-friendly interface for the absolute, unquestionable truth. We assume our specific biological rendering of the universe is the only valid one.
It really shifts your perspective, and it is exactly why you, listening to this right now, should care. The mundane world around you feels so incredibly ordinary. You might be listening to this on your commute or sitting in your office or resting in your living room. But what this text reveals is that the ordinary is a deeply mysterious, miraculous construct.
It really is a miracle.
Your commute isn't just a drive down a paved road. It's an electromagnetic interaction through mostly empty space, filtered through a survival-driven biological computer, set against a backdrop of fluid, nonlinear time. It's profoundly awe-inspiring when you really let the mechanics of it sink in.
It should inspire awe. The deeper you go, the more the mundane reveals itself as magic. And it leads directly into the final, ultimate question posed at the very end of the source material.
The big one.
Right. Once reality itself becomes as uncertain, once neuroscience and physics strip away all our comfortable everyday assumptions, we hit a wall. We are forced to ask something that lies beyond the realm of scientific measurement.
Why does anything exist at all? Why is there something instead of nothing?
It is the biggest question ever asked. And the text doesn't attempt to offer a neat, tidy answer because human logic just cannot penetrate that level of the paradox. The invitation from Nick, Maya, and the time traveler isn't to solve the origin of existence.
Rome.
The invitation is simply to sit with the mystery, to appreciate the profound strangeness of the fact that we are here at all, experiencing a universe that is vast, bizarre, and beautiful.
Just sit with the mystery. It is a really powerful place to leave the text, but I do want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. Something that builds on this idea of our biological user interface.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, if human brains evolve this specific, highly filtered version of reality just to keep our primate ancestors alive, imagine what completely different versions of reality other entities might be experiencing right now.
Oh, that is a staggering implication.
Think about it. What does the physical universe actually look like through the evolutionary interface of a bat navigating by echolocation? Or a deep-sea octopus experiencing reality through its tentacles. Or even looking toward the near future. What kind of reality might an artificial general intelligence experience?
Completely different hardware.
Exactly. An AI isn't bound by biological survival instincts. It doesn't need to hunt for calories, and it doesn't need to escape predators. So if our reality is just a heavily censored survival model, what does an unfettered reality look like to them?
It really suggests there are countless, entirely alien realities layered right on top of our own, existing in the exact same physical space, but entirely invisible to us.
So tomorrow morning, when you wake up, swing your legs out of bed and your feet hit those seemingly solid floorboards, remember what is actually happening. The reality you are stepping into is far stranger, far deeper, and far more miraculous than your brain will ever let you see.